Professor. Today we're going to be talking about our multi-engine flight scenario 3. We are traveling cross country with a friend to a baseball game. We were asked by our boss to take the light twin and while we're down there to deliver a business document. It's supposed to be VFR weather. It's about a 200-mile flight. So we're going to talk about some of the things that the pilot should be considering, some aerodynamical decision making, some single pilot resource management, weather gathering materials, and so on and so forth. So first, let's talk about the pre-flight planning and preparation. Every flight, it's essential for pilots and in command to do proper pre-flight. And that comes from the planning all the way up to the pre-flight of the aircraft. And that's to ensure that the logbooks are up to date, all the applicable maintenance items are up to date. There aren't any new squawks or anything that the pilot wasn't familiar with the last flight, the last time he flew the airplane. The aircraft, of course, is capable of the mission. We're flying 200 nautical miles, so we're going to need some amount of fuel, depending on what kind of plane we're flying. It could be a lot or a little. But it's important that we understand that our fuel calculations and our weight and balance calculations are done correctly. There's two of us going up there, depending on what kind of multi this is. That could be just fine with full fuel, ready to rock and roll. But in certain airplanes, like the DA-42, I know that it's got kind of a weird weight and balance envelope, and it's something that we need to definitely take into consideration when we're taking it on a long cross-country flight, and depending on what kind of package we're delivering or whatever, what the weight and balance of that would be as well. So it's important to know all those things during the pre-flight. It's also important that the pilot completes a proper flight plan. The risk management handbook talks about using electronic flight bags and things like that, and how that can add a certain level of risk if relied on completely or solely as a form of flight planning. It's always good to go back to the old paper and charts. It gives you a closer, more detailed look. The pilot has the ability to take more time, pay a little bit more attention to the flight plan to avoid hazards such as airspace, and spelled obstacles wrong. Airspace and obstacles. Also gives them a little bit more time to think about their fuel requirements, how much fuel it's actually going to take to get down there, plan their reserve fuels. Obviously 30 minutes during the day and 45 at night is the minimums legally, but is that something the pilot feels safe with? And then takeoff and landing limitations at airports of intended landing. So you notice that's airports plural, because we get down there, the weather changes, the wind shift. It's a several-hour flight potentially. We could have to go to an alternate or something like that. And in a multi, it's a good idea to know how long it's going to take you to land. I know where I live, we have a couple airports that are just over 1,000 feet and in length. So those airports might be a no-go for some multi-engine airplanes, or others might be just fine in and out of there. But it's something to consider, something that the pilot should be doing during flight planning phase, just taking in all that information and making accurate calculations for their takeoff distance or takeoff distance over 50-foot obstacle, their landing distances, and all the fuel requirements necessary should they have to deviate or divert to a different airport. Also, single pilot resource management. This is something we talk about a lot, especially in this class. It's important that the pilot completes the PAVE. This is where I tell all my students kind of start their flight planning, just to make sure the PIC completes the I'm safe checklist, which is illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion, just to make sure that they are ready to fly the airplane. Also things like, are they current and legal to fly? You're flying with a passenger, you need 3 takeoffs and landings within 90 days, and if you're flying at night, they need to be full stop landings, all that fun stuff. So it's a little bit that goes into the PIC, just making sure they're good. And then the other one, the big one for this one, is aircraft. The aircraft, is the pilot familiar with the aircraft? Has he flown this plane before? Has he been checked out in this plane? Is the plane safe for flight? Has he completed a weight and balance? These are all things that the pilot should be doing to familiarize themselves with the aircraft. Have they not flown this plane in a while? There's plenty of things that they should be looking at. Also, the avionics, the autopilot and GPS and the automation, things like that. Is there weather gathering materials on board like NEXRAD or weather radar or whatever? Have they planned on how they're going to talk with ATC? Is flight service going to be available on 122.2, or do they need to contact them over a VOR? All these things the pilot should be thinking about. Then To continue with the PAVE checklist, the environment. Have they got a weather briefing? 1-800-WX Brief is an awesome resource that I don't think many pilots, or not as many pilots, use that should use. These guys are professionals. They like doing what they do. And I've been told by several of them to please call them. They want to be called. It's their job, and their jobs require us to use them. If they're not being used, they're no longer going to be in business. Also, aviation weather. It's important that the pilots familiarize themselves with aviation weather and the services they provide. PIREPs and winds aloft. Obviously, winds aloft change fuel requirements, which could require the pilot to take more or less fuel depending on how long the trip's actually going to take. If they have a good tailwind, maybe they need a little bit less fuel. If they have a strong headwind, they might need considerably more fuel. And then lastly, air meds, sig meds, and convective sig meds. Flying a light twin is no different as far as capabilities go than a single engine. If there's heavy turbulence or severe turbulence, or mountain obscurations, things like that, the pilot needs to know that and be able to fly and navigate around those. If he's IFR current, maybe he needs to file IFR in certain conditions. We're obviously on a VFR plan, but there still could be turbulence and things like that that could cause the pilot to have issues. Also, sig meds and convective sig meds. This time of year, convection is just about all over the place in my area. We had some weird weather just last night, as a matter of fact, with pretty extensive cloud buildups and things like that. So it's something that the pilot needs to be concerned of. We're still calling VFR weather, but that doesn't mean that it was great VFR weather. And then aeronautical decision making. There's the analytical decision making model, which is the DECIDE model, which is detect the problem, estimate its severity, choose a good outcome, identify the corrective outcome, do it, and then reevaluate. And then there's the automatic decision making, and that's the detect, evaluate its severity, and take immediate action. In order to do this, a pilot needs to rely on their training and experience. This is like an engine out and multi. If you have a critical engine, understanding raise the dead, all that stuff, adding power to the good engine, feathering the bad engine. These are things that the pilot needs to do automatic. They don't have time to go through the whole DECIDE model. They need to make a decision. They need to do it quickly. These are the references that I used today. I hope you liked the video. I look forward to your feedback, and I'll talk to you soon. Have a good night, Professor.